All right, thanks everyone for joining us today. The minister is going to begin in just a minute. Just as a reminder, there are callers on the line, so we will shift to the phone lines at some point. And then I'm going to ask, just because of the amount of media here, that we limit questioning to one main question and then a supplemental before we try to move to another reporter, just to make sure we can get through all of your colleagues' questions. And yeah, whenever the minister is ready.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. Before I begin, I would like to introduce some stakeholders that are part of Alberta's education system. And so with me today is Lori Jess, President of the Alberta School Boards Association, Ryan Sternman, and he's President of the Association of School Business Officials of Alberta, ASBOA for short, ASBA, ASBOA. We have Simon Williams, President of the Board of the Association of Independent Schools and Colleges in Alberta, ASCA. And then Bevan Davern is President-elect of the College of Alberta School Superintendents. Thank you all for being here. These stakeholders are the stakeholders who will be charged with implementing and providing feedback on how the Education Act is implemented. It is a great day in education in Alberta. With the Education Amendment Act, I am proud to say that we are building on our province's foundation of excellence. A foundation established by the talented teachers, principals, school support staff, and trustees who work day in and day out to support our students. Today's bill will help us to deliver a modern education system so all children in Alberta can reach their full potential. So let me just say a few words about the original Education Act that was passed by the legislature in 2012. It is an act built on years of consultation with Albertans and the education system itself. It had broad support from school boards, teachers, parents, and everyday Albertans. Now it is time to bring these rules into force. The Education Act strengthens local decision-making and puts school boards in the best position to determine the needs of their students. It talks about the importance of choice and confirms our ongoing support for public schools, separate schools, francophone schools, charter schools, private schools, and homeschooling within the larger system. It confirms that the school system should support every child of every background and of every ability. It shows that schools need to be welcoming and safe places for all children. And it confirms that bullying is not acceptable and will be dealt with, whether it occurs on school grounds or in cyberspace. The bottom line is we will have an education system that is more collaborative, more flexible, and more focused on student success. While the Education Act is the modern, student-focused piece of legislation we need in Alberta, it was first introduced and passed in 2012. Consultations and conversations on how we can improve our system did, however, continue with many stakeholders until 2018. Since the bill was introduced 7 years ago, some things have changed in the sector. With our government's commitment to have the Education Act come into force for the next school year, we recognize that some updates are needed. So with this in mind, we are proposing a few amendments to maintain some aspects of the current legislation. This includes the current age of access, age of compulsory attendance, and residency rules. We know the existing rules are working well for students and school boards at this particular time. And by maintaining the current rules for these areas, we are providing certainty for the upcoming school year. As well, the Education Act was drafted under different circumstances. As you all know, in 2012, the province was booming and more students were dropping out of high school early, intent on entering the workforce to start making money. But today, students are not dropping out at the same rates, which is, of course, a very good thing. We're happy about that. But changing the age of access now would bring more students into the system. By maintaining the status quo, we will save taxpayers money while providing stability to the education system. It's also important to note that students will still be able to get that support that they need to complete a high school diploma. Since the idea of increasing the age of access came in the mid-2000s, others, such as post-secondary institutions, have stepped up to fill the gap for these much needed programs for our students who are over the age of 19 and seeking to complete their high school diploma. So they will not be left out. There is something in place for them. Bill 8 will also amend the Education Act for student transportation. The coming school year's busing schedules have already been determined and communicated to parents. So we will maintain the current rules to provide certainty and consistency. We also know it's important that parents do not pay school fees for specific instructional materials needed in the classroom, such as textbooks and paper. Amendments will ban school boards from charging fees on these materials, which continues the current practice. However, school boards will be able to have the autonomy to charge fees for extracurricular activities, such as field trips or sports teams. We will also keep the current rules around superintendent compensation, which is required given Alberta's fiscal situation and Albertans' expectations for public officials' pay. We also propose to keep the current implementation plan for leadership certification and teaching quality standards. This plan has broad support from all stakeholders, and it is logical to continue with these initiatives. Other amendments in Bill 8 are minor technical updates to align the Education Act with other pieces of legislation or current practices. For example, we will maintain the current timeline of 2020 for when changes to the common kindergarten age of entry will come into force. We are also updating the language around establishing separate school districts to reflect the current practice. Given all together, the Education Act and the amendments we are proposing will fully bring our education system into the 21st century. The School Act itself is older than the internet and cell phones. We need modern rules that fit Alberta in 2019. Advancements in technology have changed how and where young people learn. As the world continues to change, our school system needs to change with it. I am proud to say that through the Education Amendment Act, we are building a framework that puts the student first and is accountable at the local level. Ultimately, it will make a good system even better. And it will make sure our students receive the excellent education that all Albertans expect and deserve. Thank you, and I will now take your questions.
Minister, why did you take out the provision for principals to immediately grant a student's request for GSAs? The word immediately is not part of the legislation.
Thank you for the question. And under the new Education Act amendments, what you will find is that we have the most comprehensive legislation for QSA and GSA for anywhere in the country. So we are looking to find balance. I've spoken with numerous LGBTQ students that said under the previous legislation, under Bill 24, they weren't finding the balance that they even required.
Balance of what?
Balance in terms of the way that the actual programs support their individual needs.
So what is preventing it? What in this legislation will prevent a principal from dragging their feet? If a kid comes and says, we want a GSA, now the word immediately is not in it. What's going to prevent principal from just letting the issue drag throughout a school year?
Well, first of all, under Section 35(1) of the Education Act, it specifically guarantees a student entitlement to create the inclusion group.
It doesn't give a timeline.
But what it does do is it provides an avenue for the process to take place. So the steps are in very plain language. Students are to ask a staff member at the school to start a GSA. The principal permits the GSA. The principal designates a staff liaison to support the GSA. The student selects a group name. If the principal cannot find a staff liaison, the principal informs both the board and the minister, and then the minister will appoint a responsible adult. So there is a process in place. And I have got a Minister's Student Advisory Council that it will be convening this summer to further inform me on the rollout and the implementation of the Education Act. And I'm quite confident those individuals have already been speaking to me and sharing that they do feel that this is something they can support.
So there's no timeline in there, though. So what happens, is there any penalty for a principal that drags their feet on the issue?
At this point in time, we are going to roll out the Education Act, and then we will work with those situations as they arise. I do not anticipate these to arise. We also have a very strong Freedom of Information Act and Privacy Act that will support this legislation. But we will definitely be working with every school, and if there is an instance where something were of that nature to come forward, we will absolutely deal with it.
Is
How would you deal with
the
it?
intention to give principals more discretion?
The intention is to balance the need that at times students have around the way they want to create their organization, but also to allow for occasions where there is a need for parents to be involved as well, in terms of the fact that parents at times will need to, if there is an opportunity or is a situation where where there is student harm, or where there is a situation where the principal is made aware of a situation where other students are wanting to harm students, so that can be dealt with. But we do have very, very, very strong legislation in terms of the FOIP and the PIPA that supersedes all of this legislation.
But some might ask then, why change anything surrounding GSAs? There are parts of this Education Act that leave other policies in place that were already in place, so why change anything?
Because we are looking at an Education Act that looks after all students. And inclusion groups are all inclusion groups. And so they need to meet the needs of every single student. And so what we are finding is that we have heard from students. As I said, I have been in contact with my ministerial student association, and also with numerous other groups that I've met with over the last few weeks. And they have been very clear with me that they do not see an impediment to this Education Act, that they are looking forward to working with me to implement the Education Act and these particular pieces, and that they're looking for some balance as well. So I'm looking forward to hearing their comments.
I don't understand what you mean by balance. What do you mean? You keep talking about balance. The students are telling you that they need balance. Balance with what?
That's what I'm looking forward to hearing from them.
No, you told me that, you said they
They
already told you that.
they have spoken and said that they want balance in terms of what they want to see in their group, in how they organize their group, how they put it together. And so,
What's unbalanced about it?
Yeah.
What did they tell you?
well, they were telling me that they want to have all voices heard. They want to have their voices heard and not be so prescriptive. That they want to be able to take their groups on field trips and yet still have some way to contact their parents and get their support without, because right now parents are not allowed to be notified. And so students that want to go on a field trip, it's an impediment to them leaving, because there's that divide between notifying a parent so that they could go on a field trip. And
So when
So-
the same privacy legislation applies, how would that change anything from before and after?
well, because you need parental consent to be taken off school grounds. And how is that able to be managed?
How, that's
And-
the same as now, like, if the privacy legislation that applies today applies under the Education Act, we heard in the technical briefing, this doesn't change anything about the outing of students. So why couldn't they get their parents' permission and go on a field trip today?
Well, that is one aspect of it, but again, this overall piece of legislation deals with just more than one particular element. We are looking at the whole education system. And what we are very clear on is that we support every single student. And we are going to have the most comprehensive legislation that looks after every student, including GSA and QSA and all inclusion group formations.
So we have a few callers on the line, so moderator, can you put through the first caller, please?
Or maybe they left.
Moderator, could you please
No,
put through the
we're
first
here.
caller?
Yeah, sorry about that. First caller is from Kevin Berger of the Barhead Leader. Kevin, your line is open.
Thank you. I'd actually like to ask a question pertaining to the school fees. I understand that you're keeping the restriction from allowing schools to charge school fees, but the question is, in lieu of that, the province had provided a school fee reduction grant to divisions. Is that grant going to be continued in the fall?
Well, thank you for the question. We are currently reviewing all funding and all funding grants, and at this time, there is no decisions made on funding at this point in time.
Okay. Can I ask a follow-up question?
Absolutely.
Before the election, a number of school divisions had stated that they were expecting a significant shortfall in education for inclusive education funding. Basically, the funding that is given out to support students under the RTI model. Has there been any decision made on increasing the amount of money for school divisions?
Again, this is a funding issue, and we're here to talk about the Education Act, but we have been very clear, my government's been very clear, I've been very clear, that funding education is absolutely a priority for us, and that we will be continuing to maintain funding for programs, and we are also looking to build schools. But as far as specific decisions on specific grants, that is not, the decisions have not been made there yet.
Moderator, could you put through the next caller, please?
Next question is from Charles Lasave with Chat TV. Charles, your line is open.
Minister, my question is pertains to the curriculum review that was ongoing right now. I'm just wondering about the status of that at this point.
Thank you for the question. We have paused the curriculum review. We're starting consultations with our stakeholder groups and with parents and with system experts. And we will be reviewing all aspects of that, and we hope to really make that a robust look at the curriculum.
Any timeline for when a decision might be made on this, or?
Decision made on?
On when the next phase of the curriculum review, if it's going to be restarted at all?
Well, as I said, we are going to start the actual consultation piece this summer.
All right, we'll turn it back over to the floor here.
A couple months ago, there was some protests with students who were saying that they're concerned about the Education Act and some things in it surrounding GSAs. You sent out a tweet, and also in front of media, you said that you're open to having a discussion and maybe
Absolutely.
making some tweaks. So is anything in the Education Act as it's being tabled today different than the one that was planned before those protests?
Sorry, I didn't hear the question with the camera going.
Have you made any changes to this? Are there any tweaks in this surrounding GSA specifically after those protests?
Well, absolutely. In terms of my own personal commitment, I am meeting with groups. I have my ministerial association, which actually is enshrined. It is now going to be legislated as part of the Act that there will be a ministerial student advisory group meeting on a regular basis.
But specifically surrounding GSAs?
Specifically surrounding GSAs, we have looked at all of the pieces that pertain to this act. There hasn't been anything specifically changed to, that would lead anyone to not, I'm losing track of the question, I apologize. This is really my first time around, so I apologize. But really, I want to just reiterate that we are going to look after every single student. I care about every single student, regardless of the label that they have. And so I care about every single student, whether they are, whatever,
Minister, so can we just
Private
go back
school
to that first
policies-
question though?
Yes.
So with the term immediately removed, so what prevents a school principal from simply dragging out the process and leaving these kids in limbo? Why leave this legislation so ambiguous when it comes to that? Can you just definitively answer that and provide a clear answer, please?
I do not believe it is ambiguous. I do believe there is a very clear outline as to what the process is to form a GSA or a QSA or any other inclusion group. It is very clear. It's very well stipulated. It is going to be very well monitored as well. We will be having good oversight to ensure that everything goes smoothly.
So the minister has time for one more question.
Legislation says that the policies at schools have will be less prescriptive than under the current school act. Let me just read from you some of the policies. Men and women are to dress and behave in accordance with their biological sex. God's institution of marriage, a covenant relationship between one man and one woman, is the sole environment with which sexual activity is permitted and in the context in which children are to be raised. And there's another school that said they will tell all parents of every extracurricular activity their child is involved in. Are those policies acceptable under the Education Act and by you?
Every school division, every school authority will have to adhere to the law, and the law will be what is stated in the Education Act. And in the Education Act, we will have the strongest legislation for protecting our GSA, QSA inclusion groups, the ability for them to form, the ability for them to have the guidance and the attention that they need.
But aren't you
Thank
removing
you. So you can
the
follow up at our
requirement
office
them
for
to
any further
reference the Human
questions.
Rights Act?
During campaign,
sorry, I didn't hear.
said parents have the
Sorry,
rights.
everyone, the minister has to get going to a meeting,
what
but you can
happens in
contact me
school.
for further questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Know everything what
Thank you. Thanks so much.